There is a particular kind of person moving quietly through the digital world. You rarely notice them, not because they are invisible, but because they choose to be. While everyone else displays fragments of their life like shop windows on a crowded street, they remain behind a closed door, watching, thinking, calculating. They post no photos. They reveal almost nothing. And yet they see everything. Most people assume it's shyness, or insecurity, or simply a lack of interest in social media. But the truth is far more complex and far more revealing. Because the psychology of someone who doesn't post photos online is not about introversion, nor about fear. It is about power. These individuals understand something that most people ignore. Every image you post becomes a data point, a piece of the puzzle, a breadcrumb trail leading back to who you really are. And while the world rushes to share every meal, every trip, every moment of temporary happiness, this person observes from a distance, quietly mastering the one thing the internet has almost destroyed: control over their own narrative. They know that exposure creates vulnerability, that visibility invites interpretation, that the more you show, the easier it becomes to be predicted, manipulated, categorized, dismissed. So they choose a different path, a quieter one, a more deliberate one. And if you look closely, there is a strange paradox. The less they show, the more intriguing they become. The less they reveal, the more others project onto them. And the more silent they remain, the more power they appear to hold. This video is not about judging those who don't post. It is about understanding the hidden architecture of their behavior and what it reveals about identity, ego, self-protection, and the deep psychology of modern life. To understand why some people never post photos online, we need to look beneath the surface, into the quiet architecture of their internal world. Because the absence of photos is not randomness, it's not forgetfulness, it's not laziness. It is a strategy crafted consciously or subconsciously to solve an invisible psychological problem. For most people, social media serves as a mirror, a place where identity is shaped by external validation, likes, comments, reactions, a place where the self becomes a performance, and life becomes a collection of highlights carefully arranged to appear effortless. But for the ones who stay silent, this mirror feels dangerous. Some of them have learned, often through pain, that visibility attracts judgment. A photo becomes an invitation for people to dissect your life, compare your choices, measure your worth. So they step back. They protect themselves by controlling what others can see. Others fear something even deeper: the distortion of identity. Every photo posted online becomes a snapshot frozen in time, a version of you that may no longer exist, yet continues circulating as if it does. For someone who values authenticity, this feels like a loss of freedom, a small existential trap. There is also the analytical mind, the person who prefers observing rather than participating. They don't post because they don't need to. They don't crave the external echo. They are more interested in understanding the behavior of others than broadcasting their own. And then, there are those who have learned a crucial lesson. Once the world knows too much about you, it becomes easier to manipulate you, easier to predict your moves, easier to target your insecurities. Their silence is a shield, a psychological firewall. If this is already opening something inside you, a small realization, a quiet recognition, consider liking this video. It helps the channel reach more people who crave this kind of clarity. Years ago, a team of researchers from the University of Pennsylvania conducted a quiet, almost invisible experiment. They wanted to understand not what people posted, but what people didn't. So they created two groups, one formed by active social media sharers, and another composed of people who hadn't posted a single photo or personal update for over a year. What they discovered was unexpected. In the second group, the silent ones, there was a pattern. These individuals carried a depth of internal processing that most people never suspected. They weren't disengaged, they weren't apathetic, they were hyper-aware. One participant, identified only as Subject 14, said something that stayed with the researchers. Once you let the world see you, the world starts telling you who you are. He wasn't hiding. He was protecting something sacred, his ability to define himself without interference. Another participant, a young woman who refused to post any photos, described how she felt each time she considered sharing a moment online. It wasn't fear. It was a quiet discomfort. The sense that she was giving away a piece of her life that wasn't meant to be consumed, judged, or misinterpreted by strangers. For some, the decision came after a single negative experience. An unsolicited comment, a subtle comparison, a moment of envy from someone close, a picture that sparked a misunderstanding, a past relationship weaponizing old memories. Silence became a boundary. And in this silence, something interesting happened. These individuals became observers of humanity. They watched the rhythm of online behavior the same way an anthropologist studies a distant tribe, with curiosity, detachment, and a desire to understand patterns rather than participate in them. One of the researchers noted that the non-posters showed an unusual combination of traits: high introspection, high independence, and a need for authenticity that felt almost old world in contrast to the digital age. As he put it, they're not hiding from the world. They're resisting the world's demand to be constantly visible. And if insights like this fascinate you, the deeper motives behind human behavior, consider subscribing to Inner Truth Lab so you don't miss the next investigations. Here is the moment where the fog lifts, where the scattered pieces of behavior form a single clear pattern. Because the psychology of someone who never posts photos online is not random. It is structured, deliberate, and deeply revealing. At the core, these individuals operate under a different internal rule. My life is mine, not a product, not a performance. Most people don't realize how much of their identity has been outsourced to the digital world. They shape themselves according to what receives approval. They modify behavior in micro increments to avoid criticism. They gradually become the version of themselves that is easiest for others to digest. But the non-poster rejects this system entirely. They instinctively understand a powerful truth of human behavior. The moment you let others see you, you allow them to define you. Silence, then, becomes a form of self-ownership, a psychological sovereignty. These individuals tend to have a sharper sense of boundaries than the average person. Their emotional world is not open territory. They don't feel the need to announce their victories or justify their struggles. They have a private life in the most literal sense, not because they're secretive, but because they don't equate visibility with worth. And this is the paradox the world often misses. People who rarely share are not empty. They are full of thoughts, full of inner dialogue, full of identity that doesn't depend on applause. They navigate life with a quiet independence that can be mistaken for coldness, but is actually a form of depth. They guard their energy. They measure exposure. They understand that mystery is not a flaw, but a form of psychological leverage. And here is the deeper layer. Not posting is not about hiding. It is about choosing who gets access to their inner world. This selectiveness reveals confidence, introspection, and a refusal to participate in the performative nature of modern identity. Understanding the psychology of people who don't post photos is one thing. But the real value comes when you apply this insight to your own life, especially if you've ever felt pressured to share more than you wanted, or guilty for wanting privacy in a world that romanticizes exposure. Here are 6 practical reflections, written as a narrative rather than a checklist, to help you integrate this understanding. 1. Reclaim your digital boundaries. Imagine your life as a house with many rooms. Most people leave all the doors open, lights on, curtains wide, hoping others will admire what they see. But you are allowed to decide which rooms stay private. You are allowed to draw the line between my life and the world's perception of my life. 2. Stop measuring your experiences by their shareability. One quiet psychological trap of social media is believing that a moment only counts if others see it. But the deepest experiences, the ones that shape you, rarely survive translation into images and captions. Let some of your life remain unphotographed. Let it be yours. 3. Notice your motives before you post. Ask yourself gently, if no one saw this, would it still matter to me? This simple question reveals more about your emotional state than any algorithm ever could. 4. Practice selective visibility. Being private is not being closed. It's choosing who gets access. Share deeply with a few instead of broadly with many. Depth creates real connection. Breadth creates noise. 5. Build an identity that doesn't depend on applause. When you detach your self-worth from external reaction, something powerful happens. Your inner world becomes quieter, your decisions become clearer, and your life stops feeling like a performance you must constantly maintain. 6. Protect your emotional energy. Exposure drains, tension drains, interpretation drains. Sometimes, the simplest form of self-care is stepping out of the spotlight you never asked for. And let me ask you something. Honestly, quietly, have you ever noticed this pattern in yourself or someone close to you? If this insight touched you or made you rethink how you show up online, let me know nos comentários. Your perspective pode ajudar alguém que está lendo e se sente exatamente assim. There is a final layer to this topic that most people overlook. A layer that requires seriousness, clarity, and a certain level of responsibility. Because being someone who does not post photos on social media carries a quiet power. But every form of power has a shadow. People who remain silent online often develop a kind of psychological invisibility. They see others clearly, but others rarely see them. And if this invisibility is not handled with awareness, it can slowly morph into emotional distance, relational misunderstandings, or even an unintended disconnect from the world. You need to understand this. Privacy is healthy. Isolation is not. Not posting photos can come from strength, independence, boundaries, and self-awareness. But it can also emerge from wounds, fear of judgment, unresolved shame, a need to stay hidden because the world once felt unsafe. And if you don't examine which side your silence comes from, you may mistake self-protection for self-erasure. There is another risk. In the absence of visible identity, people tend to project their own narratives onto you. Some will imagine you as mysterious, disciplined, or emotionally strong. Others may assume coldness, arrogance, or disinterest. When you leave an empty space, the world fills it for you, and not always in your favor. This is why conscious privacy matters. Not silence born from fear, not withdrawal disguised as strength, but a deliberate choice grounded in emotional clarity. You also must be careful not to use privacy as a shield that blocks intimacy. Relationships, friendships, romances, partnerships require some level of transparency. Not the performance of sharing, but the openness of allowing yourself to be known by the right people. If your refusal to post becomes a refusal to connect, you may end up invisible not only to strangers, but to those who genuinely care. And finally, there is a subtle ethical responsibility. When you observe others without being observed, you hold informational advantage. You see their patterns, insecurities, desires, while revealing none of your own. Used wisely, this makes you grounded. Used carelessly, it can turn into emotional imbalance, a silent power dynamic that harms connection. So this is the warning. Silence is powerful. But power without introspection becomes a weapon pointed at yourself. Use your privacy to protect your identity, not to avoid your life. Use your boundaries to stay authentic, not to disappear. And remember, you don't owe your life to the internet, but you do owe honesty to yourself. In the end, the psychology of someone who doesn't post photos is not a mystery. It is a mirror reflecting a quiet truth about our time. We live in an age where visibility is mistaken for existence, and where silence is often seen as absence. But those who remain unseen remind us of something essential, that the richest parts of a human life are often the ones that never make it into an image. They move through the world with a slower rhythm, a deeper breath, a different relationship with themselves. They choose presence over performance, experience over display, meaning over noise. And maybe that is the real lesson hidden inside their behavior. That the parts of your life that truly matter don't need witnesses to be real. They don't need algorithms, applause, or digital permanence. They exist in the quiet rooms of your mind, in the moments no one captured, in the feelings no one else saw. As you close this video, take a moment to look at your own digital reflection. Not the curated one, not the filtered one, but the one that lives beneath it. Ask yourself, what part of me have I been showing, and what part of me have I been hiding? There is no right or wrong answer, only honesty, only awareness, only the ongoing conversation between who you are and who the world thinks you are. If there is wisdom in the silent ones, it is this: your life belongs to you first. Protect what needs protection. Share what deserves to be shared. and allow some pieces of your existence to remain untouched by the eyes of strangers, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the parts of you that are too real, too raw, too sacred to be compressed into pixels. In a world obsessed with visibility, choose at least sometimes to be whole instead of seen.